I promise you, I knew how to hit this button. I don't know how to do anything else, but like, we're good, Martin. By the way, beautiful, beautiful ceiling.
Thanks.
Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals.
That intro video really, it's actually a lot shorter than the usual ones, but like playing the Patty one makes it feel like it's 75 minutes or so. Welcome back, guys, to Tubbs the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau. Joined today, we have, hey, Dallas is on the shelf. Yes, Nickelback's back on the road. That means Dallas is on the road. So there you go. We're joined by our man, by the way, hey, Martin, nice computer, dude. Love the view of the ceiling. Martin Costco, how's it going, dude?
It's going good. It's a little sad, obviously. Big Sky kind of regular season has ended, and for those that watch some stuff, some big stuff happened Saturday night in WWE. So we're all surprised by the news, and we'll make it through together, guys.
As the resident grandpa, I have no idea what Martin's talking about. Joining us in Dallas's place, live from the city with the most beautiful compilation skyline to ever grace a walk-on apparel shirt or a Big Sky Conference uniform. We're talking about Cheney. That means we're talking about Patty. Patty, good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's been a minute since I've been on the podcast. Been busy as heck, but excited to talk some Big Sky basketball.
We're joined in the comments section. Sam Buffington saying, hello, is this thing on? And hey, Sam, look, we don't really talk politics on the show, but look, we had to go on Tuesday. There's some, let's say, national news going on simultaneously. Might be drawing some attention. Also, the coach's show happens to be going on right now. So was this the best of timing? No. Was it the only timing we could do? Yes. So
look, if you'd rather listen to some morons talk, you'd rather listen to a set of morons talk, could rather be the national or the more localized ones.
Yeah, that's a completely reasonable point, you might say. Sam Buffington, MVP of the comments section again. Politics, never heard of her. Good to see everyone. Good to see you too, Sam. So look, we're going to talk basketball for the most part. I do have a 1-second football piece of news we're going to bring up. We'll discuss it further on a later episode. University of Idaho did not opt into the House settlement. If you are curious, there's been no formal announcement, but I verified that with the athletic department today. So Idaho not opting into the House settlement, which big picture means on the ground for Idaho, nothing really changes with scholarship numbers or NIL. We'll talk implications of that on a day that is not today, because we have some batched football news we're going to eventually get to. But today we're here for basketball news. The men's season and women's season, regular season, they concluded on Monday against Montana State with a couple opposite of wins, you might say. But look, we're going to let Martin lead with the women's basketball update and talking that Big Sky Conference tournament first. So without further ado, producer redacted, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it was a interesting weekend for the last 3 games for Idaho. They lost to Idaho State on Thursday, beat Weber State in Ogden on Saturday, and then played I'd say about a good probably 25 minutes against Montana State on Saturday, which is a complete 180 from their game in Bozeman. Almost said the wrong town. Sorry, guys. Like it was like I believe it was like a 13-point loss or a 12-point loss. I can't remember the exact number, but it was not it. They were playing a lot of different game. It was a lot physical, more physical. It was it was definitely a different team. Like they tried to Coach Marrera, Muscat and the whole staff. They tried looked like they tried something different. It worked for about a half. They confused Idaho. It was okay. It was, Ryan, that's the wrong one. But still, it was a different game on Monday. They Saturday was kind of seemed like a more of a get right game, but they definitely played a lot better. Played a complete game against Weber State, who's the 4 seed, and they showed me kind of switching to the tournament bracket side of things now. I know I'm kind of just speeding through. Oops, that's the wrong one for myself. Uh, there, I'd say on the right side of the bracket, I'd much rather, like for me as a fan, I'd rather play NAU in game 2 in the second game on Tuesday next week, a week from today, as opposed to Montana State. I feel like Montana State is just worlds above where Idaho is there. I know they can. I think they obviously. I still think they can beat them, but it's a whole another. They're a very good team, and they showed it last night.
Yeah, Montana State seems to be just kind of on another level in the Big Sky women's basketball side of things. I think NAU and Montana State have been the two to beat all year, but Montana State has really kind of cemented themselves as a true one this last couple weeks of the season, and they just cause chaos for every offense in the Big Sky has had big time issues
Yeah,
dealing with
they.
them all year.
It definitely felt like they were causing a lot of. They think they had double the turnover. They forced like double the turnovers that Idaho did on Monday. It was. They are really good.
Yep. When they came to Cheney, they forced 20 plus turnovers. They just caused chaos, and that's been their recipe for success. They've been pretty good offensively, but really good defensively. NAU has been kind of the opposite. NAU is one of those teams that can just shoot lights out and beat you both inside and outside with Glancy, Feldman, everyone that they have there. And so it's kind of when you're trying to decide who you'd rather play, it's would you rather deal with a really tough defensive team or a really tough offensive team? I think that Idaho's the way that they play the game, I think they fare a little bit better against that, offensive attack that they can hopefully slow down if NAU has an off shooting night. In Boise, a lot of teams tend to have those tough shooting nights when they get down to the tournament. So I do, thinking about what side of the bracket you'd rather be on, I agree with Martin. I think NAU's side is probably the side you want to be on.
Well, and before we even worry about NAU, there's a game to be played, right? So the women are going to open up on they'll play
Monday. Yeah, Monday against Montana.
Yeah, at 1:30 Pacific time, 2:30 Mountain time. So it's in theory it's the third round. Just you guys can see on the screen if you're watching how the Big Sky Conference bracket set up. Round 1 is the play-in game of the bottom 4 seeds. Round 2 and round 3 are the same round, truly. Round 2 is when the winner of each play-in game then plays the number 1 or the 2 seed. The point of setting the bracket up this way is so that the number 1 and number 2 seeds get to watch their opponents play in the quote unquote third round game and have a day of rest heading into what would be a semifinal matchup at that point. So for Idaho, they're going to play. Well, they're playing Montana, and then as Martin covered, they're on the opposite side in their section of the bracket. It's Northern Arizona plays the winner of Eastern Washington, Sacramento State. But before we worry really about the next round, there is the current round to look at. Idaho sits at 2-0 against Montana with two 13-point wins on the season. For the first win came 63 to 50. I believe that one was in Moscow. No, that was sorry. The first one was in Missoula, 63 to 50. Second was in Moscow, 70 to 57. So two pretty clear wins. Now we'll throw an asterisk. That second Montana win was I'm going to call that a minute ago. Idaho was 5-1 in conference at the time of that last win, and over their last 9 games, Idaho is, I believe, the women and the men have had a similar track to close the year. Over the last 9 games, I believe the women sit at 3-6 as well. So both men and women 3-6 out of the last 9. So it is maybe a different Idaho team, at least as far as where they're trending. But Martin, you watched the Idaho Montana games. You've been on the show saying you like Montana as a matchup. What do you like about the Grizz as a first round matchup for Idaho?
It just like it's gonna kind of state the obvious here. Like we beat them twice now. I know I've said the same thing in the Tub Patreon doc, but then only Tub saying like I think we can beat NAU and Montana State, even though we've both lost them twice. It's hard to be. I think it's probably difficult to beat a team 3 times in a season, but obviously it happens before. Probably happen again. I think it's just the way I I know they're going through I know they have their coaching change stuff that happened in the middle of the season, and I do think that kind of plays partial role into why I think they can beat them, but it's also in the end of the day, I'm not gonna lie, it's Montana. I'm always gonna pick Idaho. I'm never gonna pick Montana, Brian. You're muted, Brian.
I was more curious if there's anything about the matchup itself that kind of stood out to you.
Not like I'll be honest, Brian, I don't really think about it like that. I'm sorry.
I gotcha.
Amateur hour we are.
No, dude. Well, I'm scanning through, and there it's kind of weird to scan through just a box score this far away because there isn't anything that really jumps out as atypical in the both Montana Idaho matchups, other than to say Idaho controlled both for pretty much wire to wire. The most recent one, Idaho led by 10 at halftime and just kind of cruised for a 13-point win. The Vandals shot right around 45% both games against Montana. And I just bring that up to say, like, Idaho didn't light the world on fire in the 2 wins against Montana. They're just a better team both times. And hey, Olivia Nelson or Hope Hasman, both of them they are solid in both the games against the Grizz, but neither had like apex performances against the Grizz either. Both those two averaged around between 14 and 16 over the course of those 2 games. So I guess part of what I like about the matchup is I know you said it's hard to beat a team 3 times. It is, but hey, this wasn't like the men where when the men beat Northern Colorado, they needed a ton of help from Northern Colorado injuries. Like Colton Mitchell had like his best half of the season, hit a dramatic buzzer beating 3. These games on the women's side, they didn't have that. Idaho just controlled it the whole way. So I guess
if they can play their style of game, they'll beat Montana the same way they beat them the other 2 sides this season by 13, and never is in doubt.
Yeah. So Martin, before we switch over, I mean, any big takeaways you had from those final 3 women's games?
No, I'm just gonna say, like, I know some fans might be worried that, like, yes, they did finish. They had the last 9 games. They were 3-6, but it's tournament season, baby. It's a whole new season. Everybody starts out with the same record, and you just got to beat who's in front of you. Don't worry about 2 or 3 games ahead. Just worry about I know I kind of like to look ahead a little bit, but it's a whole new season, and it should be a fun time down. It should be a fun time down in Boise for the women this year.
You know what? It 100% should be.
Mhm.
And you know what? We'll of course have more to talk about recording schedule. I don't know exactly how this is going to work because, hey, like, I'm not trying to step on the next segment. Women have a better chance of lasting a little bit longer into the Big Sky Conference tournament than the men do. However, the championship game is going to be that is so on the women's side that well they're on both sides. That's a Wednesday for women, a Wednesday afternoon, men Wednesday night championship game. So I don't know. We'll see if that impacts our recording schedule. It's a little bit far ahead to see. All Big Sky teams have not yet been announced, but brain dead. Expect Olivia Nelson to be All Big Sky. Hope Hasman has to be in that discussion too. Patty, because you're here, we might as well give you 10 seconds. Eagles, the Eastern Eagles play Sacramento State before losing to NAU. How's round one going to go for Eastern?
Yeah, Sac State gave Eastern some issues early in their two games, but Sac is a team that Eastern swept. So I feel pretty confident that the Eastern women can outlast Sac State. They just kind of similar to like what was Martin was saying. They just got to play their game. They got to play efficient offense and they got to play good defense, which has at times there's been streaks where the Eastern women really struggle with that. They'll have these really bad lapses of however long of awful defense, awful offense. But if they can stay out of one of those lapses, they should beat Sac State. Then you got to deal with NAU, which is a whole nother problem. But 10 seconds over.
Yeah, the sad note about Sac State, the Eastern, just a matchup, just for others that don't pay attention as much as I do. This Sac State team just beat Montana State on Saturday in Bozeman, so it's not like, yeah, I believe they're the 9 seed, right, Brian? 8 seed.
I think they're the 8.
8. Yeah, they're an 8 seed right now, but like this Sac State team, they're no slouches. If you can go into the number 1 seed and beat them on their home turf and they're in their senior day, that's nothing to write home about. Just like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably pick Eastern to win, but still, Sac State's not a slouch.
Yeah, and that's another thing to bring up with the bracket, just so people know the way the play-in games are structured. So that the 9 and 10 seed play each other. Whoever wins that plays the number 1 seed in the next round. That's on the women's side. That's Northern Colorado and top 5 Portland State. The winner plays Montana State, and then I covered Eastern 7, Sac State 8. Winner plays NAU. It's structured that way to just again give the top 2 seeds a little bit more of an advantage. I will say we're not here to bitch about the bracket, but I'm going to bitch about the bracket for 1 second. I just would kill for a tiered bye setup, similar to like what the West Coast Conference does, or like the Sun Belt does. At some point later today, maybe I'll try to throw on a bracket like that just so people can see. I do like that the Big Sky's trying to give the top seeds a little bit more, but the tiered bracket is just the way to go. So we're going to talk about the men's team in a second, but
I do have one last thing, is just as just a small note that I've noticed. Sorry, Brian, to cut you off.
Take it away.
Another thing something I can notice too. I know, like in the past, I've compared this women's team to the 2015-16 team a little bit, like in terms of fun and being able to play really great offense. The last year, like preseason, Idaho women were picked 8th this year, 8th and 7th, I believe, in both the coaches and media poll. 2015-16 preseason poll, I just went back and looked. They were picked 8th in the coaches, 6th in the media. So, I mean, not to say things are similar, but I mean, just a small fun side note to maybe just look at, if just something kind of just an interesting note that I picked up on this past earlier today.
I have nothing to add. So we're going to shift over real quick. By the way, Martin, you guys can tell because of Martin's phone, he is not running the producer role. That's Grandpa Brian as producer seducer today. So we got to talk about Houston River Expedition real quick, show sponsor. So if you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, I can't believe I forgot my microphone up there. Good Lord. Don't look past your backyard. Houston River Expedition has been Vandal owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-trip down Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway, and check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring your clothes, let HRE handle the rest. So grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. That sound has to keep becoming better. I had my microphone 9 miles away. So if it's, you know what? We all get to be JV once in a while. And if you're going to have Grandpa Brian be doing the producing, this is how it goes. Martin, you are stepping out. Is that correct?
I think he might already be gone. I think he might just be frozen.
Okay. Well, all right. There you go. Martin's out. So no question. Martin, see you later. So, okay. We're going to run through the men's team real quick. So men's team, they played 3 games as well. And then Captain 58 in the comments section, Grandpa Brian playing hide the mic. Yeah, dude. I'd say you were wrong if you were wrong, Captain, but you're not. I just forgot it, man. This is why I'm not supposed to be the producer. So the men's team, 3 games, Idaho State, Weber State, and Montana State. A quick run through. Idaho hung much tougher in this round against Idaho State than earlier in the season. And honestly, Idaho should have held on to this game, but late come apart, tip the game in the Bengals' favor. Idaho goes down 69-65. Jack Payne led the way with 18 points, Colton Mitchell 15. Then Idaho had kind of a weird game with Weber State. I say weird because Idaho they shot nearly 50%, hitting over 10 threes in the second half against Weber State and still needed overtime to pull this one out, 81-79. Colton Mitchell, definitely the MVP of that game for Idaho, 18 points. Which, hey, that's a big game, 5 assists. The bigger thing is with the final 8 minutes of that game plus overtime, Colton Mitchell really took over for Idaho, both scoring and facilitating the offense and getting guys open looks. I mean, Colton Mitchell pushing the pace and penetrating, getting guys wide open threes is why Idaho won that game. Tyler Russ had a career high 22 points as well. And then closing the season with a whimper, Idaho just gets their ass kicked on Monday at Montana State, 75-60. No outing really worth bringing up. I mean, Colton Mitchell did have 12, but took 13 shots to get there. Titus Yearout scored 15 off the bench. Yearout's had a couple double-figure games. Now they've both come in blowouts. So take that for what it's worth. But still, if Titus Yearout can contribute, that's cool. We'll take it. Idaho surrenders. Idaho allows the Bobcats to shoot 56%, while the Vandals shot 36.7%. Hard to beat anyone if that's what you're going to be doing. So what does that mean for Idaho? Well, if we look at the Big Sky Conference tournament bracket on the men's side, which we are now doing, Idaho, good God, Idaho really closed the season. Yeah, just finished the last 9 games 3-6. We're absolutely not playing their best ball to close the season, but the Vandals finished tied for 6th with Northern Arizona. Idaho and NAU split their season series, so then the Big Sky Conference tiebreaker shifts over to, well, what was your record against the top team? And if it's still tied, what was your record against the number 2 team? Well, thanks to Colton Mitchell's desperation 3 in Moscow, Idaho went 1-1 against league champion Northern Colorado, or co-league champion Northern Colorado, and number 1 seed. And Northern Arizona went 0-2. So because of that, your Vandals get a first-round bye. They're going to be playing top 5 Portland State at 7 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Mountain on Wednesday, which is, and when I say Wednesday, I mean Monday. That technically third round, but actually second round game for Idaho is Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific against top 5 Portland State. I am mixed on Idaho landing in this spot against Portland State. But Patty, you've been on the shelf for a minute. So before I filibuster you and let you just kind of sit here and watch me talk about Idaho basketball for a while, I guess, I don't know, your thoughts on the close of the season or Idaho matching up with Portland State?
Yeah, it seems kind of similar to kind of how Eastern ended the season too. You have a decent stretch of games where you're looking solid, and then for whatever reason, I feel like with Idaho, it's just if they're shooting well, they tend to really look good. And if they're not shooting well, they look pretty dang bad. And both Idaho and Eastern are really similar teams this year, as in they kind of go as the offense goes. If they can score well,
That's
they
your
can
way of
compete
saying
with
they
anyone.
suck defensively.
Yeah, exactly. Both, Eastern and Idaho are probably, I would say, two of the worst defensive teams in the conference this year. And so that's kind of just, it comes up to how they shoot that particular night. And we saw that in the Montana State game. They shot awful and they looked awful. In the Weber game, they shot decent and they looked pretty dang good. So, those streaky style of teams, it makes me a little nervous going into the conference tournament, especially when you're playing a team like Portland State, who is really good, one of the best one of the best defensive teams in the conference, and dealing with the weird shooting in the hockey arena makes you a little bit nervous. But Boise's weird, and so anything can happen. But when you look at it with conventional kind of how you would think about things knowledge, it's not a super favorable matchup with just how the style of team that Idaho is. I think that's mostly what I got right there.
Yeah, so Patty, a couple bullet points you hit is, look, Idaho defensively, they're the worst team in the conference. Portland State was the best defensive team in the conference. Portland State, they're also kind of a weird team to track because they're the top three teams in the conference: UNC, Portland State, and Montana. If you blindly looked at scoring margin on the conference season, those three are UNC is clearly number one. They beat teams by an average of just under 8 points. Montana and Portland State are right neck and neck at 4 points. I just bring up margin, guys, because that's thought of as one of the brain dead stats to explain to people hey, if you usually beat teams by a certain number of points over the conference season, that's a simple piece of evidence that you're probably pretty good. So for Idaho, the matchup with Portland State is the physicality and just lateral athleticism Portland State has it's just not a great matchup for this Vandal team. And hey, what are my points of evidence? Well, Idaho went 0-2 against Portland State, lost by 12 in Portland and 10 in Moscow. However, that 10-point loss in Moscow felt like a 900-point loss until Titus Yearout had a huge close to the game that made the game look respectable, but it was never in doubt for really even 1 second. What you're talking about, Patty, with Idaho, with making shots, the big thing to bring up first is Idaho just doesn't stop anyone. And that's gotten far worse as the season has worn on. There's different reasons for that you could think of. One, Idaho, especially at the post, they just haven't really been healthy with their posts, which leaves them a little bit, slim underneath. That's how it's been essentially the entire year. But also, this just like in football, guys, teams get tape, except in basketball, you give a ton of tape. And this Idaho team, they're just the type of athleticism they have is not really great for defense. They're a little bit undersized. And as far as most of the better Big Sky teams, Idaho, as far as lateral quickness, lateral athleticism, the team just doesn't really have too much. So what's that translate to? Well, teams score a ton. Evidence of that against Montana State, Bobcats shot over 60% on 2-point attempts, which that doesn't come because they're hitting all these pull-up 15-footers. It means Montana State could get a lot of close looks pretty much when they wanted to. So what does that mean for Idaho offensively? When Idaho shoots more 2s than 3s, I think they objectively look better. And when they can push the ball, the team objectively looks better. The problem is it's really hard to push it offensively if you're allowing teams to shoot 65% on 2s, because you're never truly getting into transition. And that's just what Idaho's going to have to do against Portland State. They're going to have to make shots for sure. But I really think Idaho needs to not settle for 3s where they're shooting as many 3s as 2s or more 3s than 2s. I know it's worked out a few times, but there's more than a few times where that has not worked out for Idaho, which is weird to say because as a team overall, if you wanted to point to the problem of this team, it actually isn't offensively. The Vandals were the number 4 offense in the Big Sky, and in spite of the lapses that we saw at times, the offense wasn't the issue for Idaho. It was defense. But I guess we've talked for a little bit on this show about Portland State being a version of a matchup nightmare for Idaho. And that's what Idaho gets. I mean, Idaho did control their destiny. They had winnable games against Idaho State they let away and just didn't really show up for the Montana State game. So that's how you close the season 1-2, aka 3-6 over your last 9. Honestly, it's kind of a miracle that Idaho's even skipping the first round in the first place. So I don't know. I mean, I said in our Discord, patreon.com/Tubbs Club to join the best place to talk Idaho sports online. It's not remotely close. I think Idaho's kind of the team that if you're not going to play Sacramento State in the first round, I honestly think every team in the Big Sky would say, I'd kind of like to play Eastern or I'd like to play Idaho in the first round just because of the defensive matchup. You talked about, Patty, you talked about how on the road, neutral court, hockey style arena, weird depth perception that doesn't necessarily lend that can help explain having like subpar shooting from deep. That if that's what your opponent's going to do, and then you're going to be able to get to the rim, that's a pretty favorable matchup either way. But I guess Patty, Idaho sits at like they close the season at 13 and 18 overall, tied for 6th place in conference. Last year's Vandals were 11-21, counting their Big Sky Conference tournament loss. So I guess I'm going to take your temperature as a former insider, now outsider. I don't know. How do you feel about Idaho come tournament time?
Yeah, definitely more optimistic than last year. Last year, those last 3-4 games were just a faceplant. And it felt like that team had some upward trajectory, and then they just face-planted really hard and ended up just not looking great in the tournament either. This year, they've had kind of a rough end of the season, but to me, from the outside perspective, this Idaho team clearly feels better. They feel like a step above what they were last year. Is it a gigantic step? No, the record's about the same. But I feel like Idaho has been competitive in more games this year. They have looked better overall this year. I think the potential of going on a little bit of a run is there. The matchup is tough, but I feel like there's clearly a step forward in the level of the program, and you've hit on it all year. It feels like Idaho is 1 or 2 really good players away from being a contender for Big Sky championships. Feels like they have a solid foundation, but they're just not quite there. They're missing 1 or 2 guys. They're missing maybe a little bit of just offensive execution and then some sort of a defense. But there's definitely a step up from some previous years of Idaho basketball, for sure.
Yeah, in our Discord, we chat back and forth, and one of the things that comes up time and time again is Idaho and post play. And I just got to tell you, Alex Preble is doing what, like, his offensive game plan is what Eastern has been doing for a while. And I just got to tell you, that doesn't mean getting no points down low. But, hey, Eastern played a lot of 5-out under David Riley and Shante Leggins before. Idaho plays a lot of 5-out. That's just how this team is going to be. And honestly, in one of the coaches' shows, Pribble referred to my man Tyler Linhart as a guard. And now 2 things. One, I kind of disagree, but then I can't disagree because the coach is the guy who plays people. So whatever the coach says the guy is what he is. But if Pribble has described guys like Tyler Linhart as a guard, that's just telling you, look, if the way this team is going to win is outside in. So what you're looking for next year is Idaho's got to get a couple at least one real shot creator. And you got to hope Colton Mitchell puts on 10 to 12 pounds of muscle. Because Colton Mitchell has been a bright spot on this team. He is, to me, really the motor of this Idaho team. And his development this year, and keep in mind, the dude's a freshman, so there's a lot of room to grow. But keeping a guy like Colton Mitchell and then getting a shot creator is, one of like two steps of this team getting to the right side of 500. I'm not worried about like winning Big Sky yet when Idaho is sitting at 13 and 18 as a year of improvement. I'm worried about finding the right side of 500 first. And that's what I think. Honestly, I think what Idaho needs to do, like I said, they got to place a little bit of defense at some point, get a shot creator that picks up 4 or 5 more wins on its own. Maybe 4, maybe 5 or 6. I don't know. Idaho did play a few. They had a few close games they lost. I know they won the close Northern Colorado game, but that's a long way of saying we both know this team's not going to win the conference tournament. But what are we looking for? One, just hope in Boise, man. Idaho has not won a single game. The men have not won a single game since the conference tournament moved to Boise. Idaho hasn't won a single conference tournament game since Victor Sanders was a junior, which I believe was the 2016-2017 season was last time Idaho won a conference tournament game. I just want to know what a conference tournament win feels like. Again, like we'll worry about championships once we got one win under our belt, right, Patty? So the bracket itself for the men, there's some ways where this game played. The Portland State matchup is not fantastic, although Portland State's had a little bit of they've had some health issues to close out the season, which I'm okay with. If Idaho's going to be skipping the first round, then I would rather have Idaho match up with Idaho State, I guess. I don't really want to play Montana State right after Montana State murdered the Vandals. But Portland State, they are a team that can't shoot as well. So if you can keep them away from the rim a little bit, like this game could be close. And then Montana, who, though the Grizz have played stronger as the years worn on, Idaho hung fine with Montana both times. So that's if Idaho's going to go, like I said, on a mini run and win a couple games, Montana's the team out of UNC and Montana. Idaho obviously wants to be on the same side of the bracket as Montana. But the phase one question is, what can Idaho do differently against Portland State? And both games against Portland State, Idaho's big issue was allowing too many close baskets. Now, I will say a downside of Portland, a good news, bad news of Portland State. They closed the season on a 3-game winning streak, beating Montana State 69-52, beating Montana 79-76, and then Sac State narrowly 59-56. The good news is Sac State is terrible, so maybe that's helpful. The downside is, the Portland State just handled a couple teams that Idaho certainly didn't handle recently. So, and Portland State has 3 wins in their last 3 games. Idaho's won 3 of their last 9. So, the teams are kind of trending in opposite directions. If you were going to gamble, Patty, not that we gamble on athletics that we're talking about, would you gamble Idaho to win this game?
Probably not. No, it's a tough matchup.
Yeah, I think the safest gamble is a loss, which is obviously hoping for something better, because I really say it's the way I feel emotionally about this team, the way lots of people I've talked to feel emotionally about this team, is that they're clearly better. It's clearly a more fun team to watch, but we're sitting at 2 total more wins than the year before, which is a negligible difference in my mind. But the answer for how this team takes its next step is it's going to be new blood. Like, there are guys on this team who Pribble clearly wants the guys to stay and is trying to build continuity, which I like, and I think people should like. But I think the players who are going to help Idaho take the next step, 1, Colton Mitchell. 2, it's going to be someone who's not on the roster for next season, because we need guys like Jack Payne, who developed quite well this season. We need guys who can get him more open shots, so that we're not having as many possessions where Jack Payne gets his shots by taking a quick 3 off of 1 pass. We need more possessions where, again, like guys like Christian Gonzalez are getting catch and shoot 3s off of deep penetration for open looks instead of, again, like, trying to create his own shot. Or, Christian Gonzalez improved as a shot creator this season for sure, but he hasn't shown the ability to turn the corner and shoot in stride layups off his penetration. Now, if the defense is collapsing and he's now attacking a closing out defense, maybe he can make that next step. But that's why Idaho, I think, is a playmaker away from things changing. James Aldrich in the comment section saying Idaho is Trey Blossom game and a healthy big away from better than decent. Decent, you meant. Now I'm going to push back a little bit because I saw Trey Blossom game play last season. I don't think he changes Idaho dramatically on the defensive side of the ball at all, but anyone who can play a little bit of defense would have been helpful for this team. So I guess, Patty, you've been on the shelf for a minute while I went on talking Idaho. I want to give you a second to talk your Eastern Eagles matching up Northern Arizona round 1, where assuming Eastern goes on a magical run, beats NAU, then beats Montana, that's who Idaho, if they go on a magical run and win a game, would be playing in the semifinals. So Eastern at NAU, or Eastern versus NAU in Boise.
Yeah, so the thing with Eastern is I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to finally win a tournament game this year, even though the team is way, way worse than the David Riley teams that were 1 seeds, that won regular season championships, and then lost the first round every year. I have a sneaking suspicion that might happen. However, I don't like the matchup at all because NAU killed Eastern both times NAU played Eastern. Carson Tout gave us big time issues in Cheney, then down in Flagstaff, McLaughlin just went off, had a bunch of points. It's similar to Idaho. Eastern really struggles on the defensive end. They will have streaks of games where they're playing great defense, but then they just have these awful breakdowns that tend to happen late in games. As soon as there's some sort of adversity, this Eastern team has kind of crumbled a lot late this year. I think of the game in Moscow where late in that game, Eastern came back and made it a game, and then all of a sudden the last 4 minutes they just pooped the bed. They did the same thing. They had a lead versus Northern Colorado and Cheney from a large portion of that game, pooped the bed late in the game. Yesterday, they had a 14-point lead on Montana at one point in Missoula, pissed that lead away late in that game. They've done this time and time again, and so, I think the only way I see Eastern winning this game is if one of their scorers has game of his life and somehow they're able to force a bunch of turnovers by the other team. But I don't really see it happening realistically. But then again, there's the vibes that Dan Munson is going to have a sub 500 season and then go further in the conference tournament than David Riley ever did. So if I was betting, I would definitely bet against Eastern, but hey, vibes.
So speaking of vibes, just so you guys have some Portland State names to pay attention to. By the way, thank you, Patty. The guys to pay attention to Portland State who've given Idaho trouble. Number 1, the guy isn't a huge scorer, but Trey Minot, he's their center. Average 7 points a game and then averages 7 rebounds a game. His size just caused problems in both matchups for Idaho. Keeping Minot a little bit off the glass, probably going to matter for Idaho to keep this game competitive. Then we also have leading scorer for top 5 Portland State, Jalen Henderson, scored 13 a game. Okay 3 shooter. It's more that he can create his shot off of penetration is a little bit more of his issue. 2 other names to track for Portland State, Terry Miller Jr. and Isaiah Johnson, both those guys averaging just under 12 points a game on the season. And hey, bring that up. There's just some athleticism on Portland State's side that's going to make this a tough matchup. If Idaho's going to win, they're going to have to not get just murdered on the glass like they had in the previous games against Portland State. 2, they're going to have to not let Portland State get to the rim the way Idaho did in the other matchups against Portland State. 3, they're going to have to hit some shots, but I really think they can't fall in love with the easy 3. If you watch the second half against Weber, that's kind of how Idaho. That's part of how Idaho got their looks. when Idaho gets threes in transition because Colton Richardson's pushing the ball and guys have wide open looks, I want the Vandals to be aggressive with threes there. That's a different type of shot than half court offense where we don't get the ball inside the three very much. And Idaho's just not making the other team exert any energy on the defensive side of the ball. So it's just kind of depends on how Idaho goes. Idaho's has stretches where they're competitive, and the good side is because the Vandals can hit threes in bunches, as long as the game can stay close, Idaho can go on a run and separate, and that's how you get a win. The bigger deal, though, is Idaho's been a stronger first half team than second half team for most of the season. So Idaho cannot be playing catch up in the second half. I just think that the Vandals, that's just that dynamic is a guaranteed loss in Boise. I think Idaho needs to get to a solid first half lead so they have some margin for error. And I really want Idaho to put pressure on the defense and get to the free throw line, get some easy points, whether that's Colton Mitchell on penetration, whether that's Tyler Linhart. I do think it's going to be tough to beat Portland State without Linhart getting some points on the inside. And Linhart having big games has tracked some of Idaho's games where they look good, or Linhart had a rough game against Montana State. Idaho got their ass kicked. So, as we've said time and again, this team doesn't have a first team all Big Sky Conference player. They need different guys to step up at different times. I would definitely pay attention to Jack Payne, Colton Mitchell, and to me, Tyler Linhart for sure. Christian Gonzalez, obviously he's in the discussion, but I just bring him up because Gonzalez, he's best if other people are helping create his shot. For example, Colton Mitchell getting penetration. Gonzalez has been better at putting the ball on the floor, but because he doesn't get all the way by his guy when he's shooting a decent amount of twos, they're usually pretty tightly contested shots. So anyway, Gonzalez is a guy who can have a big game too, but the Vandals are going to need a very good defensive effort, and they're going to need to have a few guys making shots because Portland State is, as far as a first-round matchup the men's team could have, I do believe Portland State's the single worst one. I'd certainly rather Idaho be playing Eastern, NAU, Weber, or Sac State first round. On the fence about Montana State, Idaho State, probably would go with either of those teams over Portland State. But look, the bracket is what it is. The game is Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to be tuning in because it's a good thing now that Idaho men's basketball is improving to the point that we can be kind of frustrated when certain corners aren't turned because the team is getting better. There are pieces we want back next year for a fact. But if Idaho's going to take a next step next year, it's going to be from new guys in addition to internal development. But I will say, throw all complaints aside, and complaining is part of why people watch sports. We can be honest about that. Throwing all that aside, this has been a fun team to watch. I would like the fact of this team. It's been fun to watch that I do feel connected to more so than some of the other teams last few years. I would love them to finally pick up a win in Boise. I don't think it matters in a literal sense as far as recruitment that much. I just think that as this program is moving in the right direction, there's just certain developmental steps you got to take at some point. And I feel like a win for Idaho in the conference tournament would mean more to the guys returning next year than just the single extra W in the wins-loss column.
Agreed. And I feel like that would be kind of a marker that would really feel like that improvement on the record and make the season feel more like an improvement when you're looking back on it however many years in the future on the paper side of things rather than just watching it, because we all know that they're better, but having that extra win there really does feel like it would help a ton.
No, it would. And I really like Alex Pribble. I want him to do well because then I get to watch good Vandal teams. But then I just like the guy. I like what he's doing. So there's a lot of reasons to want that extra win. And I just to have a little bit more space. 3 more wins this year versus 2 more wins this year compared to last season. It doesn't matter. Like your sales pitch to whatever guard or whatever player you would hope is gonna help the team take the next step next year. That pitch doesn't change no matter how many wins in the conference tournament or no wins Idaho picks up. It's this pitch is still going to be, hey, we've got the pieces to turn this into something real. We need you. You can be the guy. Here are the keys to the car. an extra win doesn't change that. But there's certain times where you want, just for the team and for the fan base, you want that like extra, like, emotional dopamine hit, you might say. And the conference tournament win would most certainly be that. But we're pretty good to call this a day. Just blindly picking now, Patty, who's going to win the Big Sky Conference tournament, men's side?
I mean, it's tough to say. I think Northern Colorado has a pretty good shot to do it this year. But, I mean, Montana State's won the last 3 years. It's going to be tough to pick against them, even though they haven't been quite as good of a team this year. It's just for whatever reason, late in the year, they're always rolling. But if I had to put money in, it's the 1 seed, Northern Colorado. Unfortunately, I just think that they have unique blend of being able to shoot the 3 and being able to lean on a big guy like Brock Wisney. That's going to help them a ton. And on their side of the bracket, I feel like some of their matchups are better than for a Montana, who would have to play. I mean, NAU and Eastern maybe aren't as bad of a matchup, but playing a Portland State who just beat them in overtime a few days ago, I think the matchups for the Grizz are a little bit tougher. So I'd put my money on Northern Colorado.
Yeah, I think I would bet on Northern Colorado. One, just to bring this up, because we haven't talked like conference stats leaders that much, because to me it hasn't been that big a deal. Northern Colorado has 3 of the conference's top 11 scores in conference play. That's Isaiah Hawthorne, Langston Reynolds, and Jerron. Really, those 3 average between 18 and 14 points a game. Having 3 different guys who can lead you to victory in that way, who play complementary basketball. That's why Northern Colorado finished tied for first place. And honestly, again, they're a miracle Colton Mitchell 3 away from just being the outright champions in the Big Sky. Now Montana is solid, but they're better than last year for sure. They've taken some developmental steps. This has been kind of a redemption year for Travis DeCure in a way, depending on how you want to understand it. But we'll say, like, hey, Montana was way better offensively this year. That'd been one of the issues for Montana for so many years. Is like they play tough defense, but they're just garbage offensively. Well, they're the number 2 scoring team in the Big Sky. Like that is a pretty big change. DeCure did take he relinquished a little bit of control of that offense, and it's not an accident. Montana took a step in the right direction. I just think Northern Colorado is a better team. I think they've got more talent, and I think Northern Colorado is the team to pick for the conference championship. And like you said, Northern Colorado, I think they match up better all the way to the championship game as far as like actually get into the conference final. The Idaho State Montana State game is going to be fun. If I'm Northern Colorado, I want Montana State to win that game. I know, like you brought up how they've won the last few conference championships. You're right, but as far as a team that can pull an upset, Dylan Darling's one of the top 2 scorers in the Big Sky. Can create a shot. He can score 30. He can score over 30. He's done it this season and win the game by himself. Montana State doesn't have a guy who can do that. So that's out of those 2. That's probably why I'd rather be playing Montana State. And on the Montana side, Eastern always plays Montana tight. That's just kind of how the Eagles are. NAU has one of the top scorers in the nation in Trent McLaughlin, which, hey, if he has a big game, that can change things for you. And then the likely matchup of Portland State, because I like Idaho, but I want to win. I'm just not. If I'm putting my own money on it, I'd probably put it on Portland State. Montana just lost a tight game to Portland State. Both those teams play physical. That's the kind of matchup that can be a little bit, it can be an ugly but tight game come tournament time. I just think it's smoother for Northern Colorado. But we can call that a night. We'll record at some time in the future to close out the men's and women's basketball season. We'll probably take a week. Once we close that out next week, we'll probably take a week off, and then we've got batch football stuff to cover, like our thoughts on Idaho opting out of the House settlement. I'll run through some of the recruits we haven't talked about yet. And then spring football, not that far away. Thomas Ford's already released the calendar for it. So, yeah, we've got football stuff upcoming. It's not that far away. But for those who've hung around during basketball season, thank you as always. Support the show, patreon.com/Tubs at the Club. And thank you, Patty, for stepping up. So we have not just me talking Idaho basketball, which is cool. And check, if you guys are really starved for Big Sky stuff, Patty's turned out a bunch of stuff on Eagle Power Hour, especially covering recruits. So maybe we need to get Patty in to help us out with Idaho recruits. We'll see. But until next time, go Vandals.
Go Eagles.
Now, I know you guys thought that I was ready to close the show. Of course not. So we're just going to wait here for a second. Also, God damn it, StreamYard changed the names of everything. So now I have to click like 16,000 times. Thanks for coming, guys. See you soon. I-D-A-H-O! Idaho! Go, go, go! Jesus Christ.
Go Vandals. Go Vandals.